It's 8 p.m. You've just gotten home from a long day at work. Your spouse and children are winding down from their day. You had a slight headache at work, so just before you get ready to step in the shower, you grab some Tylenol from the bathroom cabinet. But then suddenly, your chest tightens up, your palms begin to sweat, your legs start to lose all feeling. Your eyes become so blurry, you can't see yourself. The sounds of tiny footsteps on the wood floor and the evening news drift quickly until all sound is gone. You desperately try to scream out for help, but your brain just couldn't seem to get the message to your mouth. Next thing you know, you're waking up in a hospital connected to all sorts of lines and tubes. A doctor walks in and asks your name. He asks your age, and then if he asks, "Do you know where you are?" After the questions, the doctor proceeds to try and explain that you've been in a coma due to a prolonged grand mal epileptic seizure. At least that's how it happened to me. Epilepsy isn't always pinpointed at birth. Sometimes you can even be sitting in the same room as someone and not realize they're having a seizure. There are many forms of epilepsy, and there are even many wide known and recognized public figures that suffer from epilepsy. So let's just jump right in. How could you not realize someone has epilepsy? First off, a seizure is a sudden excessive electrical discharge within the brain. Seizures can be generalized or focal, and with focal seizures, sometimes you don't even lose consciousness. With a simple partial seizure, your awareness could be completely unaffected. Your sense of smell and taste could be altered, maybe some nausea or anxiety, maybe even a small brief twitching in your hand or in your foot. Not all forms of epilepsy result in fierce convulsions and biting your tongue. Now that we've discussed the not so obvious nature of epilepsy, let's talk about a couple different types so we can better understand what epilepsy is all about. A person with epilepsy can experience multiple types of seizures. For instance, photosensitive epilepsy. People who suffer from this type have seizures that are triggered from flashing lights, contrasting visual patterns, and overexposure to video games. Another type would be grand mal. This type is tonic-clonic, meaning the seizures that take place involves loss of consciousness, violent jerking due to muscle contractions, and even sometimes total control loss of your bowels. So now that we've gone over the not so obvious signs of epilepsy, along with the different types, I'd also like to briefly mention a few well-known public figures that suffer from epilepsy. My first example is rap superstar Lil Wayne. He has dealt with epilepsy for almost all of his life. Back in 2013, he was hospitalized due to a cluster of seizures, according to Healthline. Another example is Theodore Roosevelt. He had epileptic seizures amongst a number of other health problems, but during his time in office, he didn't speak out about epilepsy because of the stigmas attached. Although he once did say, "Courage is not having the strength to go on. It is going on when you don't have the strength." And last but not least, the Academy Award-winning actor, Danny Glover. Mr. Glover struggled with epilepsy as a child, although some struggle with it their entire life. Danny said eventually, "I could recognize it happening. Each time I got a little bit stronger and symptoms began to diminish to the point where I was ready to go on stage. By the grace of God, he outgrew the disorder altogether." In conclusion, epilepsy awareness is important to have because, as I mentioned, it's not always obvious to the untrained eye. There are many different forms of epilepsy, and it's much more common than you may think, even with some of the most influential people of all time.